Every action we take in life emerges from a seed within the mind. Sometimes that seed is carefully chosen, planted with patience and nurtured with awareness. Other times it is scattered carelessly, thrown into the soil without thought, and what grows is wild, tangled, and often destructive. This is the difference between intention and impulse. One is deliberate, steady, and connected to awareness. The other is sudden, restless, and born from the pool of unexamined desires. To live with wisdom requires learning to recognize the difference, because the quality of our life depends on the quality of the seeds we plant through our actions. Impulse is quick, often sharp, and it carries with it the energy of reaction. It arises when something touches our senses or emotions, and immediately a spark is lit. That spark can drive us into words, into movements, into decisions that feel urgent in the moment but fade into regret once the wave has passed. Impulse is the force that makes a person speak when silence would have been wiser. It is the reason someone reaches for distraction rather than facing discomfort. Impulse seeks relief, but rarely does it bring resolution. It is short-lived and shallow, demanding action without reflection. Intention, on the other hand, requires slowing down. It is born from presence, from stillness, from the willingness to pause and observe before acting. Intention is not about denying action, but about giving it direction. It is like an arrow carefully aimed before being released. Where impulse scatters energy in all directions, intention gathers energy and channels it into a single path. The difference between the two can be seen not in one moment, but in the shape of a life. A life ruled by impulse is fragmented, restless, always reacting to the outside world. A life guided by intention is cohesive, calm, and aligned with inner purpose. When we act on impulse, we often surrender control to circumstances. A harsh word from another person, an unexpected event, a fleeting desire, all of these become masters of our behavior when we live reactively. But when we act with intention, we reclaim that control. Instead of being pushed and pulled by the world, we become grounded in clarity. Intention is not about resisting life, but about meeting it with awareness. It is choosing not just what to do, but why to do it. In this way, intention transforms even the smallest actions into something meaningful. Consider how a simple gesture can carry two completely different energies depending on whether it comes from impulse or intention. To speak kind words impulsively, in hopes of being liked or gaining something, leaves no real depth. To speak kind words intentionally, rooted in genuine care, carries weight and resonance. The same outward act can be shallow or profound, depending on the state of mind from which it arises. This is why training awareness is essential, to see clearly whether our actions are springing from impulse or intention. Impulse feeds on urgency. It whispers that something must be done now, that waiting is impossible, that stillness is unbearable. It thrives in the restless mind that cannot sit with discomfort. Intention, however, rests in patience. It is not rushed because it trusts that the right action taken at the right time carries more power than 100 impulsive reactions. This patience does not mean passivity, it means strength. The strength to hold back when every nerve is urging to rush forward. The strength to stay centered even when emotions storm inside. The training of discipline, whether through meditation, mindful breathing, or daily practices of awareness, is nothing more than the cultivation of intention. Each time we sit in silence instead of reaching for distraction, we are strengthening intention. Each time we breathe through anger instead of letting it control us, we are giving energy to intention. Slowly, the impulses lose their grip. They do not vanish, but their power weakens. The space between stimulus and response grows wider, and in that space, intention finds room to emerge. Life offers countless examples where this difference plays out. The impulse to spend recklessly versus the intention to save and build stability. The impulse to argue and defend versus the intention to listen and understand. The impulse to quit at the first sign of difficulty versus the intention to persist and grow. These are not small differences, they shape the entire direction of existence. A single impulsive act can destroy what took years to build. A single intentional act repeated steadily can create what once seemed impossible. Impulse belongs to the surface of the mind, where waves crash constantly. Intention belongs to the depth of the mind, where the waters are still. To live from impulse is to live on the surface, always tossed about by external winds. To live from intention is to sink into depth, to find the steady current that guides without force. This depth is not something external, it is already present, waiting beneath the noise. Silence reveals it, awareness strengthens it. And from there, every action that arises carries with it the weight of clarity. The path to living with intention is not about denying impulses altogether. Impulses will always arise, for they are part of the human experience. The task is not to eliminate them, but to observe them without obedience. To see the spark arise, to recognize it as impulse, and to choose whether it deserves action. This act of choosing is the birthplace of freedom. It is the line that separates a reactive life from a deliberate one. Each choice made with intention becomes a building block of character, of destiny, of a life lived with meaning rather than chance. Intention and impulse are not equal forces. One demands energy quickly and burns it away. The other requires energy slowly but multiplies it over time. One scatters, the other gathers. One leaves behind regret, the other leaves behind growth. To walk the path of mastery, one must learn to shift the balance, to weaken the grip of impulse by strengthening the clarity of intention. And this shift is not achieved in great leaps, but in small, steady steps, repeated each day with awareness, until intention becomes the natural way of moving through the world. In life, there is a temptation to always seek what is new, what is thrilling, what makes the heart beat faster. The mind craves novelty, the sudden spark, the unexpected rush of excitement. It is a natural human tendency to be drawn toward things that promise quick satisfaction, immediate stimulation, and instant results. Excitement often feels like a burst of fire in the dark. It lights up everything around for a moment, but then fades, leaving you once again in the silence of your own thoughts. Consistency, on the other hand, appears ordinary, repetitive, sometimes even boring. Yet it is within this repetition, within the silent discipline of showing up again and again, that the deepest forms of transformation and strength are born. Excitement speaks to the surface. It thrives in the newness of beginnings. When you start something for the first time, energy flows effortlessly. You do not need to convince yourself to engage because the novelty carries you forward. But the true test is never in the beginning, it is always in the continuation. After the initial spark fades, when the task becomes familiar and the glitter is gone, many abandon the path. They seek the next source of stimulation, the next new experience, the next rush of emotion. This cycle traps them in a life of constant beginnings but very few completions. Excitement opens doors, but consistency is what carries you through them. Consider the practice of any skill. A musician may fall in love with the sound of an instrument and feel electrified the first time they play. But unless that musician practices daily, repeatedly, even on days when the music feels dull, their ability will remain shallow. A martial artist may feel empowered the first time they throw a punch or hold a stance, but true mastery comes only from standing in that stance thousands of times, even when the legs shake and the body resists. Consistency creates depth, while excitement often remains at the surface. Consistency requires discipline. It demands that you act not only when you feel like it, but also when the mind tries to convince you otherwise. Excitement thrives on emotion, but consistency thrives on choice. When you decide to commit, you take power away from fleeting moods and place it in deliberate action. This shift builds resilience, and resilience builds character. Without consistency, your growth remains unstable, subject to the rise and fall of temporary feelings. With consistency, even the smallest step, repeated over time, creates unshakable strength. The danger of excitement is that it can be deceptive. It makes you believe that the intensity of the moment is equal to progress. But progress is rarely loud. It is quiet, subtle, often invisible in its early stages. A tree does not grow because of a single burst of sunlight, but because of a steady pattern of nourishment, season after season. In the same way, your own development depends less on moments of great excitement and more on your ability to stay with a practice long after the initial spark has faded. There is also a hidden freedom in consistency. Excitement keeps you chasing, running toward the next high, dependent on outer conditions to feel alive, but consistency roots you in something deeper. It makes your growth independent of external circumstances. When you learn to stay, to persist, to show up even when the thrill is absent, you cultivate an inner stability that no external factor can easily shake. You begin to trust yourself because you no longer rely on being carried by fleeting motivation. Instead, you rely on your own chosen discipline. Excitement will always have its place. It is not to be rejected because it can be the spark that sets you on a path. But it must be understood as only the beginning, not the whole journey. If you mistake excitement for transformation, you will always end up disappointed because transformation is a slow process. It moves like water shaping stone, not in one moment, but through countless repetitions. True growth does not announce itself with fireworks. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, until one day you realize you have become stronger, calmer, more capable than before. The mind resists consistency because it demands patience. Excitement promises a reward now, but consistency asks you to trust in a result that cannot yet be seen. To walk consistently is to surrender to the long process without constantly questioning its worth. It is to trust that repetition itself is a form of wisdom, that by returning again and again, you are building something beyond what the mind can calculate in a single moment. It is not the one who starts with passion who becomes strong, but the one who continues with discipline. The true masters of any craft are not the most excited, they are the most consistent. Their strength lies in returning to the basics, repeating what seems ordinary until it becomes extraordinary. They learn to find meaning even in the mundane, and through this, they surpass those who chase only excitement. Consistency and excitement are not enemies. They are parts of the same journey. But they are not equal. Excitement is the spark, consistency is the flame. Excitement shows you possibility, consistency turns that possibility into reality. To live only for excitement is to live at the surface of life, always beginning but never deepening. To embrace consistency is to accept the slow unfolding of growth, the patient building of strength, the quiet power of transformation. Respect and possession may appear, at a glance, to walk on similar ground. Both seem to imply a kind of attention, a form of acknowledgement, a relationship between one and another. Yet, when we look more closely, they are not only different, they are opposed in essence. Respect is born from freedom. Possession is born from control. Respect seeks to honor, while possession seeks to confine. Respect allows something or someone to exist in their own truth, while possession bends them to fit within the boundaries of our desires. Respect opens the hand, possession closes the fist. When you respect, you recognize the independence of the other. You see them as they are, not as you want them to be. Respect acknowledges the uniqueness of life, the individuality of paths, the distinct rhythm that every person or being carries within. In respect, there is space, space for growth, space for mistakes, space for difference, space for distance. But possession narrows. Possession builds walls around the other and says, "You belong to me, therefore you must act in accordance with my will." Possession demands sameness, predictability, and control. In possession, there is no space. Consider how possession arises. It is not only about objects or property. It begins in the mind, in the way we attach ourselves to people, outcomes, or identities. To possess is to cling. To cling is to fear. Fear of loss creates the drive to control, and the drive to control hardens into possession. The possessor does not simply want to have, but to keep, to secure, to prevent change. And in this act, the natural flow of life is interrupted. Everything that is possessed resists, for life itself cannot be contained. Respect, on the other hand, grows from understanding. It is a recognition that nothing can truly be held, for all things shift, evolve, and pass. Respect understands impermanence. It bows to the fact that people will change, circumstances will shift, and the river of life will flow on. Respect does not resist this truth, it aligns with it. To respect is to see the impermanence of things and still choose to honor them in the moment. Possession cannot do this because it is built on denial. It denies impermanence, it denies change, it denies freedom. In relationships, the difference becomes even clearer. When there is respect, love breathes easily. Respect gives the other the room to be, to discover, to grow beyond the boundaries of what they were yesterday. Respect does not bind love with conditions, it nurtures it with presence. Possession, however, strangles love. It replaces appreciation with demand. It asks the other to conform, to stay the same, to not step beyond the lines drawn by insecurity. Love under possession becomes distorted, transformed into attachment and dependency. Respect is not passive. It is not indifference or neglect. It is an active practice of seeing the other clearly and affirming their autonomy. It says, "I honor your path even if it does not serve my comfort. I recognize your freedom even if it unsettles my certainty." Respect is strength because it requires the courage to release control, Possession is weakness because it disguises fear as authority. The impulse to possess often comes from the desire to secure meaning in an uncertain world. To own something, whether it is material or emotional, gives the illusion of stability. Yet this stability is fragile, for what is owned can be lost, what is controlled can slip away, and what is confined can break free. Respect instead finds stability in acceptance. It finds peace not in ownership, but in alignment with reality as it is. It trusts the natural ebb and flow. It trusts that what is meant to remain will remain, and what is meant to go will go. When we examine ourselves deeply, we may notice how often we confuse respect with possession. We may call it care, we may call it love, we may call it responsibility, but beneath it hides the desire to own, to hold, to define another's boundaries according to our own. This is where mindfulness becomes necessary. To watch the mind as it grasps, as it clings, as it seeks to label another as mine. Awareness reveals whether we are respecting or possessing. Respect is a gift, both to the giver and the receiver. It lightens the heart, for it does not carry the burden of control. It frees the mind, for it does not construct cages of expectation. It honors the natural dignity of life. Possession, on the other hand, is heavy. It demands constant vigilance, constant maintenance, constant fear of losing what has been claimed. It enslaves both the possessor and the possessed, binding them in chains of insecurity. To live with respect is to walk lightly. To live with possession is to drag weight. One opens pathways, the other closes them. One aligns with the truth of impermanence, the other denies it. One nourishes love, the other suffocates it. One cultivates freedom, the other cultivates fear. Respect is not only for others, it begins within. To respect oneself is to allow one's own journey to unfold without comparison or judgment. To respect oneself is to release the compulsion to possess identities, titles, or roles that no longer serve. Just as we can attempt to own another, we can attempt to own ourselves, locking our being into patterns of refusing change. Respecting oneself means stepping out of those cages, honoring the process of becoming, and trusting the movement of life within. Possession will always resist transformation. Respect will always support it. Possession fears uncertainty. Respect embraces it. Possession seeks permanence in what is impermanent. Respect sees impermanence as the very ground of growth. Possession imprisons. Respect liberates. Patience and urgency appear to be opposites, but they both sit in the same room of human experience. One teaches you how to endure, the other teaches you how to act. Together, they create the rhythm of life. Yet most people are trapped in extremes, either waiting too long or moving too fast. The balance between patience and urgency is not something that can be given to you from the outside. It is something you must cultivate from within. It requires awareness to know when to pause and when to press forward, when to hold your energy and when to release it into action. Patience is not passive. It is not sitting back with folded arms, hoping that something will change. True patience is active stillness, a readiness that is not rushed but also not careless. It is the discipline of waiting with focus. A tree does not rush to grow, it expands in its own season. Yet the stillness of the tree is filled with activity, the roots searching for water, the leaves opening to light, the branches strengthening against the wind. In the same way, patience in life is not doing nothing, it is preparing in silence, observing, understanding, and aligning before you act. Urgency, on the other hand, is the fire of now. It is the recognition that time is not infinite and that opportunities do not wait forever. Urgency is the ability to break hesitation and move with force when the moment demands it. Without urgency, patience becomes stagnation, a disguised comfort zone where nothing grows. Without patience, urgency becomes recklessness, a force that burns out before it builds anything lasting. To live only with urgency is to constantly chase without breathing. To live only with patience is to never step forward even when the door is already open. The conflict arises because people confuse urgency with anxiety and patience with laziness. Anxiety is not urgency. It is a restless fear of missing out, an agitation of the mind that does not lead to clarity. Laziness is not patience. It is avoidance dressed as calm. Patience is strength held in reserve. Urgency is strength released at the right time. Both require discipline. Both require awareness, and both are incomplete without each other. In training the body, one learns this balance naturally. If you lift too heavy too quickly, the body breaks. If you wait too long to challenge yourself, the body weakens. Growth comes from pressing at the edge and then allowing the recovery. The same applies to the mind. If you are urgent without rest, the mind burns with fatigue. If you are patient without testing yourself, the mind remains unsharpened. The alternation between patience and urgency is the rhythm of mastery. Patience is the soil, urgency is the seed. The soil without the seed remains barren. The seed without the soil cannot root. Together they create growth. You must ask yourself, when is the time to prepare, and when is the time to act? When is the time to breathe deeply and wait for clarity? And when is the time to run with full speed because the chance is before you? The wisdom is not in choosing one over the other, but in recognizing which moment demands which quality. Most suffering comes from confusion between the two. People wait when they should act, and they rush when they should wait. They hold back their words when speaking would bring healing, and they speak too quickly when silence would have been stronger. They procrastinate on what matters and hurry toward what is meaningless. The mind without balance sees urgency in small things and patience in important things. The disciplined mind sees urgency where it matters most and patience where time itself is the teacher. Think of water flowing through a river. Sometimes it moves with urgency, crashing over rocks, cutting through the land with power. Other times it pulls into calmness, patient in its depth, still on the surface, but full of movement underneath. Both are the same water. Both serve the same journey toward the ocean. Life is no different. There are seasons where urgency is your ally, where you must throw yourself into the fire of action. And there are seasons where patience is the key, where the deeper work happens in silence, away from the eyes of the world. The one who learns the art of balance does not waste energy. He does not exhaust himself by running without pause, nor does he lose his way by waiting without action. He carries patience in his breath and urgency in his steps. He is steady but not slow, fast but not careless. This harmony allows him to transform both failure and success into lessons, to shape his own destiny instead of being shaped by chance. Patience gives you endurance, urgency gives you movement. Patience allows you to trust the process. Urgency ensures you do not waste the moment. To ignore one is to weaken the other. When both are practiced together, life becomes a dance between stillness and action, silence and speech, waiting and moving. The balance is never fixed. It changes every day, every moment, depending on what life presents before you. And it is only through awareness, discipline, and practice that one learns when to embody patience and when to embody urgency in life. Many people spend their time and energy existing only on the surface. The surface is the realm of appearances, of immediate impressions, of quick judgments and shallow understandings. It is the space where external validation dictates our worth, where material possessions and fleeting achievements become the measure of success. On the surface, everything is fast, everything is loud, and everything demands attention. But just because it is visible does not mean it carries depth. The surface is what most people see, yet it is rarely where truth resides. Depth requires stillness, patience, and the courage to go beyond what is immediately observable. When one lives only on the surface, the mind becomes restless. It is constantly searching for the next distraction, the next validation, the next reason to feel alive. But such aliveness is temporary, and once the moment passes, the emptiness returns. Depth, however, is different. Depth is not dependent on applause, recognition, or external approval. Depth is the quiet strength of a rooted tree, standing firm regardless of the storm on the surface. To live in depth is to live connected to something unshakable, something that cannot be taken away. The surface deceives. It creates illusions of stability, illusions of happiness, illusions of success. A smile can mask sorrow. Wealth can hide insecurity. Applause can conceal loneliness. But depth never lies. Depth reveals the truth of who we are beneath all the masks and roles we play. To touch depth requires honesty, and honesty is often uncomfortable. That is why many avoid it, preferring instead to remain at the surface, where distractions are abundant and silence is rare. Depth is accessed through reflection. When the mind grows quiet and one observes thoughts, emotions, and sensations without judgment, one begins to notice what is beneath the noise. The surface is the wave, constantly shifting with the winds of circumstance. Depth is the ocean beneath, vast, steady, and profound. To live only in the waves is to be thrown about endlessly, but to rest in the depths is to discover stillness even while the surface storms rage on. The challenge is that depth requires time, and modern life glorifies speed. People want quick results, instant gratification, immediate transformation. But depth cannot be rushed. It grows slowly, like roots descending deep into the soil. Just as a tree cannot flourish without roots, a life cannot flourish without depth. The stronger the roots, the taller the tree can grow. Without depth, success collapses at the first sign of difficulty. With depth, challenges become opportunities for greater understanding. Surface living also thrives on comparison. People measure themselves against what they see others doing, what others possess, how others appear. But comparisons are only possible on the surface. Depth knows no comparison because depth is unique to each individual. The more one sinks into depth, the less one is concerned with competing, and the more one is occupied with understanding. Comparison fades, and what remains is clarity about one's own path, one's own values, and one's own rhythm. Surface is often loud, filled with voices, opinions, and noise. Depth is silent, and in that silence lies power. From silence arises clarity. From silence comes insight. From silence comes alignment. Those who are unafraid of silence are those who discover their own depth. The world does not often reward silence, but silence rewards the one who seeks it. It provides a foundation that no external recognition can provide. Depth also changes how one relates to others. On the surface, relationships are built on convenience, appearances, and shallow agreements, but depth recognizes connection beyond appearances. It values authenticity over performance, substance over show. When depth meets depth in another, the connection is lasting, unshaken by changing circumstances. Such connections cannot be formed on the surface because the surface is too fragile to sustain them. The practice of seeking depth is not about rejecting the surface entirely, but about not being deceived by it. One must interact with the surface. It is part of life. But the mistake comes when one forgets that beneath every surface lies a greater reality. To remember this is to live with balance, engaging with the surface without losing touch with the depth. The difference between depth and surface is also the difference between reaction and response. On the surface, people react instantly, guided by impulses and emotions. In depth, one responds with awareness, with presence, with clarity. A reaction is quick and often regretted. A response is deliberate and rooted in understanding. The more one lives in depth, the less one is tossed about by fleeting emotions, and the more one acts from a place of grounded wisdom. Depth also transforms suffering. On the surface, suffering is seen as misfortune, as something to escape as quickly as possible. But depth reveals suffering as a teacher, a guide into deeper understanding. Pain pushes people beneath the surface, forcing them to ask questions that comfort never does. Depth shows that suffering is not merely an obstacle, but a doorway. On the surface, it feels like an end. In depth, it becomes a beginning. To live with depth is to realize that true fulfillment is not found in appearances, but in essence. It is not in how things look, but in what they are. It is not in being seen, but in truly being. The surface demands performance. Depth calls for authenticity. On the surface, people seek to impress. In depth, people seek to express. And in this shift, life takes on a different meaning. Depth cannot be given, it must be discovered. No one can hand it to another, no one can shortcut the journey. Each person must enter within themselves, confront the illusions of the surface, and find the patience to dwell in silence long enough for depth to reveal itself. The surface is easy, depth is demanding, but it is in the demanding journey that strength, clarity, and true freedom are found. The human mind has an extraordinary ability to project itself beyond the current moment. It creates stories of what is yet to come, spinning endless possibilities, painting visions of success, security, fear, or failure. At the same time, the mind revisits what has already passed, replaying events, attaching emotions, rewriting scenes that cannot be changed. Between these two tendencies, anticipating the future and reflecting on the past, the present moment becomes overshadowed, blurred like a background detail in a larger painting. This is the tension of life, the pull of tomorrow against the weight of today. When we think of the future, it appears as a place of promise. It whispers that fulfillment is waiting, that answers will be discovered, that growth will be achieved if we just keep moving forward. The future is where we place our goals, our dreams, our aspirations. It is the imagined destination of our journey, the place where things are supposed to make sense. Yet this same future also becomes a place of fear, uncertainty, and anxiety. Because it does not exist yet, it can never provide us with stability. It is a shifting landscape, built from our imagination, never quite solid enough to stand on. The present, however, is the ground beneath the feet. It is what is happening now, the breath moving in and out, the sensations alive in the body, the sounds that fill the space around us. The present is the only moment that can be touched, the only moment where life is actually lived. Yet it is often ignored because the mind is convinced that what truly matters lies somewhere else. This neglect of the present leads to a restlessness that grows within. One part of the self is here, but the mind has already traveled far ahead. The result is fragmentation, an inner division that drains energy and obscures clarity. The conflict between future and present becomes more visible when ambition dominates. We push forward with determination, planning, striving, believing that if we can just arrive at a certain point, life will finally feel complete. But what is overlooked is that the state of completion cannot exist in the future, because when the future arrives, it is no longer the future. It has transformed into the present. This is the paradox. All that we long for in the future must ultimately be experienced here and now. The peace, the fulfillment, the freedom we hope will come later must be cultivated in the only moment that truly exists. The mind, however, resists this truth. It prefers to cling to the idea of becoming, of progress, of eventual resolution. There is comfort in the illusion that tomorrow will fix what feels broken today. But when the habit of postponing is repeated over and over, life becomes a series of waiting rooms, each one anticipating the next, never settling fully into the richness of the present. The future, in this sense, is always just out of reach, always asking for more time, more effort, more sacrifice without ever delivering what was promised. And yet the future is not without value. It plays an important role in direction, in purpose, in vision. To deny the future would be to ignore the very capacity of the human spirit to aspire, to imagine something greater, to move toward growth. But when the future is allowed to dominate, when it overshadows the present, it becomes a source of suffering. The art lies in balance, the ability to hold a vision for tomorrow while remaining rooted in today. Without the grounding of presence, the vision of the future becomes hollow. Without the guiding star of vision, the present can fall into stagnation. To understand this balance, one must examine the way attention flows. Where the attention rests, energy follows. If the attention is consumed by the future, energy is constantly projected outward, toward what does not yet exist. This can create a feeling of depletion, of always reaching and never arriving. If attention is anchored in the present, energy returns to the body, to the breath, to the awareness of being. From this grounding, the vision of the future can be approached not with desperation, but with clarity and patience. Consider how a tree grows. It does not abandon the soil in pursuit of the sky. Its branches extend upward, but its roots dig deeply into the earth. The growth is both vertical and grounded, both aspiring and present. If the roots are neglected, the tree cannot sustain its upward movement. Likewise, if we neglect the present, the pursuit of the future becomes fragile. Presence is the root and vision is the branch. Both are necessary for the unfolding of life. The relationship between future and present also reveals something deeper about control. The present moment is the only space where actions can be taken, choices can be made, reality can be shaped. The future cannot be acted upon directly because it has not yet arrived. It is only through the present that the future is influenced. To invest fully in the now is to plant the seeds from which the future will grow. If one constantly chases the future without tending to the present soil, the seeds remain unplanted and the imagined harvest never comes. But the mind resists such grounding because the present can feel uncomfortable. It reveals emotions we wish to escape, circumstances we do not want to face, realities that challenge our expectations. The future becomes a place of refuge, a safe distance from the rawness of the now. Yet this escape prevents transformation. By refusing to be with the present fully, the opportunity for growth is delayed again and again. To reconcile the pull of the future and the reality of the present is to understand that life is not a race to arrive somewhere else. It is a continual unfolding of moments, each one carrying its own completeness. The future will always remain ahead, but the present is always here, steady, alive, asking to be noticed. And only by noticing it fully can the path forward hold meaning.